Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Good afternoon, and thank you very much for the organizing committee for inviting me to present about this important topic, which I think probably it's getting part of our life. Shukran. Before I start my presentation, how many of you are using biosimilars in their institutions? Can you raise your hand? Are you aware that what you are using is biosimilar or biologic? Not every time. Do we know how to differentiate these two? I mean, if something is written, that's what I teach my fellows during the, for example, the clinic. Do you know what's the difference? How would you know that this drug is biosimilar or biologic? Because, for example, the most famous one is adalimumab. It's written in the same way. But usually they would add a suffix which is called ATT or A2, which means biosimilar. So it's not the original one. And sometimes the patient themselves will not realize that what you are giving them is a biosimilar, unless if they look at the box color or shape, which sometimes they would say, I received something different. Is it the same or not? So the biosimilars, I think, is a reality now. So instead of probably talking about it as a proposed option, I think it's part of our practice. Sometimes, as Abdurrahman said, it's part of our regulations that we have it in our practice. Before I start, I have nothing to disclose. And let's start with just defining the biosimilar. The biosimilar is sometimes called a follow-up biologic. So it's a therapeutic drug that's highly similar, but structurally identical to the brand biologics or the reference product. Usually, every biologics would have something called patent or براءة اختراع. So they would stay for almost like 10 years without having any other manufacturer manufacturing something similar and marketing it to the public. Once the patent expires, then the other manufacturers would produce biosimilars, which is usually in a lower price. And again, because of the similarities between the two products, usually there will be no clinically meaningful differences in both efficacy and safety between the biosimilar and the reference product. These are just some examples of the commonly seen biosimilars, and probably adalimumab is among the agents which has too many biosimilars produced early on. And now we have a couple of these available. And in our practice, for example, at King Faisal, we have been using Amgevita as a biosimilar for the last probably 3 years. And it's completely replaced the original one. And you could see that the others, and sometimes, for example, rituximab, we have been using Rituxan, or Truxima, which is a biosimilar for rituximab for, again, 2 to 3 years. What we prescribe is rituximab, and we think that we are giving the biologics, but what's being given already is the biosimilar. I think this is very important because that would play part in the pros of the biosimilars which the companies are proposing. This is a study which was published in August 18, 2023, talking about the economics of biosimilars and the challenges of biosimilar adoption in low and medium income countries, which is very important. And I think these drugs are quite important for these countries because 85% of the world population lives in these areas. And 80% of the sales of the monoclonal antibodies are attributed to the Western countries rather than to these countries. So there is what we say imbalance or unmet need in these countries, which probably require these therapies for complicated patients. So the biosimilars are presenting a good solution for these countries, at least to meet the unmet needs. In Saudi Arabia, again, part of the transformation is the Vision 2030 and the healthcare, the transformation plan, again, is directed to make the healthcare more effective, comprehensive, and again, among the priorities that we need these therapies to be available to every patient. We need to have these patients having easy access to the healthcare. And we need to have financial sustainability, which is very important. This study was published from the Saudi FDA, and they were talking about the landscape of biosimilars in Saudi Arabia. And they were basing this study on the plan of our Vision 2030. And they said that the biosimilars field is expanding in our country. And as of July 2023, we have 38 biosimilars approved in different indications. So the transformation and the care in Saudi Arabia, again, drive the accessibility and adaptability to have biosimilar in our practice, and probably the administration of different institutions are probably going in the same direction just to execute the healthcare transformation plan from the Vision 2030. Worldwide, again, this is taken from the Center of Biosimilars Approval. In the United States, as of July 17, 2023, there is a total of 45 biosimilars approved and 37 launched for use. In Europe, because EMA started adopting and using the biosimilars early on, since 2006, we have a total of 75 biosimilar approved to be used. So I'll start the pros. And the main pros or advantage or benefit of biosimilar is definitely the cost saving. And why is that important? Because the originator biologics are quite expensive. And that's very clear, again, for those who are dealing with these agents, especially for those who are paying by themselves, or even for the insurance companies who is paying for these patients. So there will be clear, substantial cost saving, not only just for patients, but for payers, employers, the governments, and patients. And this would help in offering a low-cost treatment. And in some of the studies, they found that in the United States, for example, the biosimilars are expected to take 8 to 10 years to develop at a cost between $100 to $200 million, compared with an estimate of $2.6 billion for their counterpart biologic. So there is clear difference in the cost. And the manufacturer, again, would have a fewer expenses to spend because they don't need to go through the whole process of manufacturing a new drug. So they would have lower list prices. Something else that the biosimilars would introduce a competition in the healthcare system. So number of treatment choices increase for a disease, then the manufacturer will be incentivized to reduce their prices. And we noticed that because I'm chairing the Biologics and Biosimilar Committee in my hospital for 2 years, even the originator or the biologic, after introduction of biosimilars, they reduce their prices significantly, but still the biosimilar price will be offered with a lower price. In RAND, which stands for Research and Development Cooperation, they estimated that the biosimilar would reduce the direct spending on biologics by around $54 billion from 2017 to 2026, which is about 3% of the estimated biologic spending over the same period, with a range of 24 to 150 billion. And according to the Association of Accessible Medicine, the biosimilars have a potential to save the US healthcare, as an example, by around 133 billion by 2025. So this is based that 50% is using biologics and 50% is using the biosimilar product. And as you could see here, this is the saving for the different biologics, and you could see that logically the anti-TNF products are taking probably the major saving by around 64%, followed by the monoclonal antibodies and the immunostimulant, excluding the interferons. This is just an example. In our last meeting, in our Biologics and Biosimilar Committee that we met 3 days ago, this was one of the new biosimilars for eculizumab. Eculizumab is considered one of the most expensive drugs that's being used for indications like hemolytic uremic syndromes and other specific indications. And you could see the saving here for an estimated number of around 140 to 150 patients in our 3 branches of King Faisal Hospital. You could see that the saving in a year will be around 13.6 million riyal in a year. So that's quite substantial and important. We're thinking about it. After saving the cost, I think what we would have if we have more biosimilars available, that you would have diversity of treatment options. So instead of having single treatment option available, then we have multiple options available. So if a patient is not improving on one agent, then you could try the others. And that would make the patient and their healthcare providers to make choices based on factors such as efficacy, safety, and cost. And as we said, this diversity is very important, especially in those who get complex diseases who are not responding, for example, to a specific therapy. Competition, I think this competition is very important, especially for the companies. So as you could see that in the initial table I showed that, for example, adalimumab, we have 8 biosimilars approved for use. And each one of these biosimilar is trying to get access to the healthcare system. So far, in our institution, the Amgifita is the only one which is approved, but probably we have other agents with probably better characteristics which might again be introduced instead of Amgifita. So that would encourage the competition to have the best products, and that will be quite important again for the pharmaceutical markets, because again that would even encourage the companies to produce a more potent and more suitable biosimilars. Improved access to biologics, I think that applies for the low-income countries, as we said earlier, that these countries probably they don't have the available biologics, so the biosimilar will be a good solution. That's why probably India would represent one of the main countries where they have the biosimilar manufacturer very active there. However, still the quality might be questionable. However, we have now enough numbers produced by the famous companies. So the improved access would help even patients to have a better outcome and getting the treatment early in the course. Efficiency of the healthcare system sustainability, I think this is very important because once you have some saving, probably that would make the healthcare system more appropriate by directing the amount saved of money to the other patient care related like points which need to be covered in the hospital. And that would help again by improving the healthcare accessibility globally, especially in the developing country, as we said earlier. Innovation and research incentives, that's mainly apply for the companies who are producing these medications. So the biosimilars definitely encourage the innovation by creating more competitive landscape. And that will be very important again, as we said earlier, that you would have a better products at the end result. Market dynamics, I think that's very important because by having more biosimilars, you would have more dynamic market, which would encourage, as we had, the research and development in the biopharmaceutical companies or sector. And with that, I think the supply chain for this drug, because sometimes you might have interruption in the supply of these medications in some hospital. In our hospital, for example, when we were dependent on the biologics, you might have sometimes where you have deficiency or lack of store of that medication. So that would make some interruption for the treatment of these patients who are in need. Improving the patient outcome, this is again very important because these patients would get the treatment early on, and you could even choose other treatment available, which was not probably available without having the biosimilar around. So that would just summarize what we have. So the increased use of biologics, or here talking about the biosimilar, would increase the access and the outcome, and that would increase the healthcare efficiency, and that would expand and probably expedite the option treatment for these patients in early phase. Financially, I think this is very important because the spending which is directed for the biologics would be redirected for other important part in the patient care. And that again would help in improving the access. So the cost saving will lead to increased access of medication, and that would improve the outcome at the end. If we have more options available, that would increase the competition between companies. Then we will have more products produced by lower price, and at the end, even the originator biologics might be available even with lower price. Just to summarize, the biosimilars offer opportunity for a system-wide cost saving, and it would be less expensive than biologics by approximately 1/2 in some of these cases. Approval of biosimilars create additional treatment options for expensive brand biologic treatment, and eventually the biosimilars provide patients with lower cost medicines, which would make these treatments more accessible, and eventually that would improve the quality of patient care. Thank you.